32 ticks following, so they are swallowing. Monkey is swallowing. Snake self swallowing. Next, a swallow two will fly and come and swallow. You're ever swallow in a hollow gallow, making a whole lot of halabaloo. Jalikalu, we know say you chop the money some, so give me the loot. Do you really want a revolution or just your turn?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Ake Arts and Books Festival. My name is Olubunmi Aboderin-Talabi, and with me today to discuss Folktales sans Moonlight, writing for today's African children, are Deborah Ahenkorah, Sarah Odedina, and Victoria Inegbedion. Deborah, Sarah, and Victoria, it's lovely to meet you, and let's get right to it. Yes. I hope you're all well.
Yes,
I hope you're coping with the lockdown pandemic. Oh. You know, I'm sure it's we have different expressions of it all in different countries. I think we have 3 different countries represented here. Someone in England, someone in Ghana, and 2 of us in Nigeria. So it's great to see everybody here today. So this topic is one that fascinates me no end. Hopefully we'll come up with some practical ways to rebuild, some practical ideas of how we can rebuild the children's book industry, not just in West Africa, but across the continent. If I may start straight away with some questions. I was rather excited when I was told who was going to be on the panel with me, and I have lots of questions for each of you. So I'm going to start with a question to Deborah. Deborah, what's your assessment of the children's publishing industry in Africa?
That's such a loaded question. I think, it is nascent. The industry is in a nascent state. Publishing in most countries is primarily focused on textbooks because books, schools and governments have traditionally been our biggest customers. And when there are children's books, well, at least in Accra and several of the countries that I've been to across the continent, you walk into a bookstore and 95% of the books that you find are, books from around the world. So in a situation where there's just so much easy access to great stories from everywhere else, it's almost like, why go through all of the 1,000 hoops that it will take to create equally great content of your own. So I think that's the greatest bottleneck of the industry. And if we're looking at an industry-wide assessment, what it looks like is that until that bottleneck is cleared and we really have momentum in terms of quantities of books and the quality of books being produced across the continent on a regular basis in a consistent way, and those books are finding ways to travel beyond national markets to other territories. So therefore the market size is larger, people are able to do larger print runs, therefore better higher cost of productions, you're still able to make a profit on your books. I think until we have that momentum, the nascent stage that we're at remains for a while, which means the industry stagnated. So we're still in early stage. We need to grow. It's not happening at the rate that it could be happening at.
Okay, thank you. So that was an excellent answer. Basically, we need to clear the bottleneck, and we need to do more things to encourage writers, local indigenous writers, to write and not just rely on stories that come from around the world, as brilliant as they may be. And this is actually a nice segue to my next question, which is for Victoria. Victoria, what's it like being a bookseller? Because you own Victoria's bookstores in Port Harcourt. What's it like being a bookseller in Nigeria? And I don't know if you have much experience with the whole continent, but at least what's it like where you have your store?
Okay, so when I decided to start selling books, I think I had a romantic idea of setting up a bookshop in a local community, and I felt like the people would gather and come to the local bookshop and like thirsty animals to a watering hole. But I mean, I quickly found out that romantic idea was not the right idea at all. And I think for me in particular, it's kind of unique because I don't just sell books, I sell books to children. And I think it's a little bit different when you're selling books to adults, because an adult comes into a bookshop, she knows or he knows what he's looking for. He's there because he wants something. But for a children's bookshop, you have different kind of people coming in. You have the adult that is there because they want to buy books for their children. You have the adult you have children who want their books, but you also have the adults who don't even understand why they need to spend money on children's books, and they come in and they wonder why the books cost so much and why they have to spend that kind of money when it's not something the children are going to wear or they're going to eat. So it's so that's a little bit it's concerning, and I guess a number of times I got a little bit disappointed with all that, but I think there's something happening, and I think more parents, more people are leaning towards reading in Nigeria and reading our own stories and buying our own books. And I think it's very exciting what I'm seeing in the country, and I'm supposing the continent at large. And I think it's really exciting because I feel like a lot of parents, they grew up reading, and then somewhere along the way they kind of lost it, and they're trying to encourage their children to do the same thing. And I feel like at the rate it's going, in a few years, it's going to be something great altogether. So selling books in Nigeria, in particular, as you know, it's difficult, it's challenging. People think, why are you doing this? Why couldn't you do something else? But I mean, it's something, it's born out of passion. It's born out of a need to fill a space, need to fill a hole that is seriously gaping in the market right now, in the country right now. So, I mean, it's been a positive experience, but I just still think we need to see more booksellers, more people entering the industry, more people thinking that important as it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that's been my experience as well. I find that the children love the books. They want the books, but the parents are complaining about the cost of, of the books. And I often find myself telling them, well, if it's okay for you to spend, 600,000 on a wristwatch for daddy, and it's okay for you to spend 60,000 on Weave On for mommy, then it's all right to spend 3,000 on a book for Junior, but still, and it's, some of them take offense at that, but hey, we'll just keep advocating for the love of reading in parents. There's a lot of talk about inspiring the love of reading in children, but it sounds like we need to reawaken the love of reading in parents. Yeah, thank you for that, Victoria. Sarah, hello. How are you? I've admired you from a distance, and for me, this is really lovely to have an opportunity to have a quick chat with you. What would you say are the strong points of the children's book sector in Africa? What are the strong points? Surely there must be some strong points.
Oh, there's many strong points. I think the fantastic imaginative power of writers is the first really big strong point. People that Deborah and I have come across when we've been working on Accord seem absolutely untrammeled by a sense of limitation on the stories that they can imagine and the stories that they can create. I think that's a hugely important strong point, that the talent is there, and the talent is very, very keen to be heard. I think another strong point is the desire to create new narratives that draw on a tradition of storytelling and folk tales and traditional storytelling, as well as the realization that there's a need for a different sort of story, a contemporary African story. And there's a lot of stories that we're reading which are concerned with politics and social issues, things like gender roles and social and economic inequality. So there's a fantastic determination to embark on addressing some of the social issues that writers feel are important in the lives of young people.
Great, that's really good to know. And I'll give my own book a quick plug there, because you talked about the roles in the family and what have you. And yes, I do. I agree with you. I do agree that it is actually important to have here and now realism in our books. It's great having books that talk about the folk tales and the traditions and everything, but there's room for a wide spectrum of topics in children's books, in African children's books in particular. And I'm also really glad to see lots of writers stepping up, particularly over the last 2-3 years, and producing these great contemporary picture books and other books, YA books, easy read books for children. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Actually, I want to ask Sarah a question, another question. Are there any standout countries doing remarkable things in children's publishing that you can think of that, that others should perhaps emulate?
I sort of feel slightly guilty by going to two countries that we're very present representing here in this conference. I think Ghana and Nigeria are doing very interesting things. I think South Africa, of course, is doing really interesting things in terms of publishing. In East Africa, Zimbabwe, there's some wonderful publishing houses and also really innovative approaches to selling and marketing books around the continent. So my knowledge of the continent is most focused on West Africa, and certainly in Nigeria and Ghana is where I see really interesting things coming through, and publishers embarking on doing really interesting things, rethinking formats, trying to get pricing to work, as Debbie was saying. The issue is to do with how expensive books are. They're expensive everywhere. They're expensive all over the world, and sadly, children's books do suffer when people start to feel the pinch. And publishers are really addressing how to keep their books relevant for a young audience in terms of content and for parents in terms of affordability. Okay,
so you say Ghana, Nigeria are doing interesting things. You said South Africa is doing interesting things in terms of publishing. You've talked about the way we're looking for ways to make pricing work, the way we're playing with different formats and things like that. So that's good to know. Thank you.
Thinking hard about distribution. So ebooks as well as print books, audio books, apps, reading apps. People are thinking really hard about how to, with the problems of physical distribution, which aren't unique to the African continent. They are an issue around the world, I think. And people are thinking about how to get books directly into people's homes.
Okay, great. So that's good to know. So we're doing great in terms of distribution and overcoming the hurdles, the various logistical hurdles that may present itself in some of the countries. Maybe if we have time later, I'd love to know a little bit more about, what you find interesting in Zimbabwe and South Africa and other countries like that as well. Thank you, Sarah, for answering that question. Deborah, are there notable public policies about publishing or children's books in particular that are worthy of emulation by other countries? And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that question. I read recently about, it's either Denmark or Norway, where they have a policy, where the government has a policy that for every book that comes out, and I believe they're focusing more on self-published books, but for every book that comes out, the government buys 1,000 copies of that book and they distribute it to public libraries as a way of supporting I'm sure it's the self-publishing industry. I couldn't quite find that reference just before this meeting, but yes, it's definitely there. And I thought to myself, this is awesome. If we could have that in Nigeria, that would really encourage a lot of authors, a lot of writers, So what do you think? Are there other notable public policies about publishing or about children's books that are worthy of emulation by other countries?
Yeah, I think the most progressive space in children's books has been in mother tongue book production or book production in indigenous languages. And I think that's largely because a lot of donor funding is focused on that. And so when the donors stipulate that, the governments respond. And also there are government policies around early childhood education in mother tongue. And what happens is that because there's no competition in that space, right? You can't import books to fill that space. Then we mass produce books for that. So I think that's probably been the place where consistently I've seen the most progress. I've also seen progress and like momentum in the spaces where large NGOs enter. So in countries like Rwanda, who are great with like international partnerships that bring in donor funds, I see a lot of support for books published in Rwanda. There are really exciting children's publishing houses in Rwanda that are consistently producing great work because the ecosystem there is supportive of their publishing. In Ghana, there were a few years ago, there were some big USAID projects championing reading, championing literacy, that produced their own books and had funding bought books from publishers. So those kinds of interventions are where I've seen that kind of support. I feel like with government, because in most countries, using Ghana as an example, the hurdle of providing kind of free basic education hasn't yet been scaled by the government, so that it's difficult for them to prioritize supporting publishing, because like their attention is occupied, their manifestos are filled with promises on like providing schools, providing teacher training, providing basic education, that like it struggles to be consistent when it comes to supporting publishing. And also, again, honestly, I feel like our need for books is truly numbed by the massive inflow of books that we get from around the world. So you take cartoons, for example, like who's crying that we need cartoons for African children? We're not crying, because you switch on the TV and they have a lot of cartoons. So when there's a band-aid that numbs the need in the short term, it's difficult to prioritize when there are other pressing issues. And I really think that's what a lot of governments face around the continent.
Okay, those are very good points. So basically, we're being the pain is being numbed by the constant barrage of content from abroad, basically. So, and what you're saying is that there are other things, there are other priorities that government need to focus on. So they don't see the publishing industry as necessarily something urgent. Particularly
and there are not enough champions.
Stopgap measure. Not enough champions. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like if any of us here were in government, we would be pushing for the prioritization of locally produced children's books. But if those advocates aren't there, and then those, exactly, we absolutely need champions. Those of us in the space already need to, really band together better, you have a stronger voice, advocate more strongly, and make more compelling cases as to why this matters. Because as of now, all of the other issues are by themselves making their own cases, and this space that we all care about keeps not making it onto the priority list, so not getting the funding it needs.
I see. Thank you for mentioning this need to band together. A group of children's writers and illustrators have recently come together in Nigeria to form an organization called the Association of Children's Authors and Illustrators of Nigeria, because we do need each other. We need to learn from each other. We need to pull together and benefit from economies of scale and have some sort of clout, so that when we do make a presentation to request for a consideration in policy, our voices are more likely to be heard. So more details about Arcane, ACAIN, will be released over the course of time. But I believe that it's the association is going to be rolled out with some training sessions for children's writers and illustrators, and then take off from there. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. We do need
and as you mentioned that, I'll just piggyback off of that. So the work that Sarah and I do at Accord Literary is focused on finding and supporting writers across the continent, helping them throughout the process, however they need help, however we think we can support, to produce publishing-ready manuscripts, and getting those manuscripts international publishing opportunities, and championing that, once if we get a deal in the US, it doesn't end there. We have these books published in as many markets as possible. And one of the big things that we feel like we have the capacity to support with is trainings, right? So, Sarah, my business partner at Accord, has over 25 years experience in publishing, working with some of the biggest authors in the game, J.K. Rowling, for example. And so she wants to bring that experience through our work at our port to provide training. So just a few weeks ago, we launched our very first virtual masterclass for writing fiction for young readers, and we opened that up. It was a free masterclass. We had brilliant session with over 200 people registered.
Oh wow!
But we did, three sessions, 3 different weekends, session trainings. We're also very excited that during the Ake Festival, we'll be doing another workshop that will also be open for people. So the first, when it comes to banding together, I think on the one level is the national and the regional, but also really thinking very creatively across the board of who has something that we want, and we can think of some kind of creative partnership to really advance the space. So we would be very happy, Sarah and myself, to see how we can support the association.
Yes, please.
That would be directly aligned with the work that we're currently doing.
Oh wow, that's fabulous. This is such good news, music to my ears. So I'll make sure to mention it to the Arcane members that you have a training session going on during the Ake Festival.
Yes.
And then after this call, perhaps we can have a conversation about the training sessions that we want to organize for next year, for Q1 of next year, for budding writers, because there's so many of them. I get DMs almost every month, I would say, from different people that want me to mentor them. And I'm like, you know what? We need to have some sort of formal structure in place. And I really need to get the experts to come in and mentor them, because I'm also doing this by the fly. I feel there's a need and I'm writing, but this would be great. This would be really, really good. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Deborah, for this initiative. Thank you. So my next question is to Victoria. Victoria, what would you say are the growth areas in children's and YA publishing?
Oh, for mean on the continent. I'm assuming you mean on the continent and in the country. There's so much I feel that needs to be done. And I think, like Deborah was saying, first of all, I think we need more advocates, more champion the cause of Nigerian literature and African literature at large, because it's there's a large dearth. And I feel like we have so many stories that we need to be telling, and we need people who to tell them and tell them in the way that they need to be heard. I feel like going forward, more people, more writers are going to be writing more of these stories and sharing these stories with people. And I think that we also need to reflect the realities of our society, our present day society, and all the things that are going on with the young people today and the children in our stories. And I feel like writers need to do more about that. And I see that happening more and more, just as it is in all kinds of publications, actually all kinds of writings these days. I remember when I was younger, and just like we mentioned, most of the stories that we read about were about folktales, stories by Moonlight, which is fantastic. Those are wonderful stories. But more and more, we need to raise the standard. Write better stories, write them in a better way. I find like so many people want to write, but they don't even know where to start from. And they write their stories and the standard is a little bit low. So I feel like we need to raise the standard. We need to write better stories that will be acceptable both to our people and not just our people, other people all around the country. We want people to read our stories and feel excited, feel interested in what we have to say and what the reflections of our society. So that's what I see. That's what I see going forward. I just feel that there's so much room for growth, so much room for improvement, and not just in the stories. I feel like in the production of the books as well, because there are a lot of books too where the books are poorly produced. They're not attractive to anybody. They can integrate in a matter of minutes, and the illustrations, the cover, the print quality are very unattractive. And I feel like that is just not good enough. We need to do better. And more people are realizing that, and more people are putting effort into the work that they produce and the writing. And I think that's fantastic. So I'm hoping in a few years, you walk into a bookshop and the section of the bookshop that has the African literature will not be so vastly dissimilar to the section that has books from all around the world. So that I think that's what I hope to see, and I feel like we're on the right path towards that.
Yeah,
yes.
and I completely agree with everything you said, Victoria, completely. And I think that if we keep the readers in mind, like the children today have really almost like cosmopolitan taste because of all they're exposed to, and children don't have an agenda. So, you'll put an African book next to them, and then you'll put like a book from elsewhere, and they'll pick the one that their eyes are attracted to. They'll pick the story that delights them the most. So we can produce all we want. And if we are not getting the quality right, if we're not focused on delighting children, they will not pick up those books. And like, what did we achieve, right? So the conversation about quantity, about progress cannot be had without the conversation about quality. And I think the conversation about quality should be focused on delighting readers.
I love that. Delighting readers.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I fully agree with you. And with my books, Toby Bakes the Cake, Toby Learns to Swim, Diary of a Toddler, Cobb the Antelope, all of them, I was very particular about production quality, because just like you, Victoria, I wanted my books to be as good as any Julia Donaldson book anyway. In fact, that's my dream, that one day I will walk into any bookstore anywhere in the world and I will have my own entire shelf, just like Julia Donaldson has her own entire shelf. It doesn't matter which country I go to and I visit the children's book section, I always see she has from floor to ceiling her own shelf. All the other children's books are stacked together, but she has her own. So I thought to myself, well, my books have to be as good, or better, with respect, much respect, Julia Donaldson, but my books have to be as good, right, as that. But the thing is, just to talk about the other side of this point, is the cost involved. As we mentioned before, the people who are buying the books, the parents mostly, and some grandparents, though I find grandparents are more lenient with their funds when it comes to their grandkids than the parents sometimes. But the parents are complaining about the costs of us producing these really beautiful, high quality books. And it wasn't until after I started in the publishing field in Nigeria that I actually fully understood that, listen up, you can make your book as beautiful as, I don't know, the sun, the moon, and the stars. But if you cannot do it at a price point that is affordable, then you will have people compliment the books. You will have children desire the books, but the parents will simply leave the books hanging on the on the shelf. So we have to somehow find a balance. And I think you may have struck a balance with your book. I believe I can hold up your book, even if you can't. But I believe you found the balance. I don't know, but I think that this book was produced here in Nigeria. I may be wrong. But it was produced by a Nigerian publisher, but not printed in Nigeria. Okay, I see. Okay, but great. I was going to say great production quality. I love the design, great clarity. Everything very, very attractive, very good looking. Kids would want to pick it up as well. But I look forward to the day when we can actually produce these types of books, locally, because that would help. We hope in keeping the price down. Help. From what I understand, it's funny because I hear this from publishers all the time, and maybe Deborah and Sarah can tell me better. It seems that producing in Nigeria is more expensive than producing abroad sometimes. So that's hard to understand. And also going back to, asking people to spend a little bit of money, I think it all comes down to priorities and education. Because, like I said, having a priorities, yes. Education. Yes. So they'll come into the bookshop and they look at a book and they say, how much is it? And I tell them how much it is. And they scream, why is it so much? Yes. I have to tell them that, what, after reading it, you can they shake their heads and they look at you and they think, this one you go mine. So I think it's also like, you just have to prioritize, and you just need to, because really, wherever it is, even books in the UK aren't cheap. They're not cheap anywhere. But it just depends on whether you're ready. Whether you're ready to spend the money. That's what all it means. So I think it comes down to the parents educated, understanding that it's necessary. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's not. It is a necessity for the cognitive development of their children. Sarah, Sarah, thank you so much, Victoria. Sarah, I have a question for you. Why do you think there are so few literary agencies for African children's authors and illustrators on the continent? I was so delighted to hear about Accord. You're the first literary agency that I've heard of that is focused on the continent, but has reach internationally. In fact, let me be honest with you, you're the first literary agency I've heard of, period, in West Africa, or with a West Africa focus. So Sarah, why are there so few literary agencies for African authors, African children's authors and illustrators?
I think a large part of it is a lack of realization of what an agent can do, and the contribution that agents can make in terms of helping authors develop their work and get their work ready to submit to publishers. It's a bit of a niche job in a way. And it's certainly one that in the US and the UK and in Europe has become a very important part of the publishing chain. But relatively speaking, relatively recently, the ascendancy of the agent has happened in the last 30, 40 years in UK publishing, where, of course, we've been publishing in the UK for hundreds of years. So I think it's not having that role as traditionally part of the chain between getting a book from an author into the hands of readers. I think that because publishing has become more complex, there's more call for agents in the chain now. And I hope that we'll see lots of other agents coming into the environment of publishing on the continent of Africa, because they help support the industry. My general belief is that writing is a learnt skill. There's people are born with the desire to write, and they want to write if that's their dream. But generally, writing gets better and better the more you do it. And if agents can position themselves to help make that process easier for authors, that's a good place for them. And I suppose agents people need to see that there's a role. And I think also it's training and having the inside information to know what an agent does. I mean, Deborah and I have that experience because of our, relatively speaking, international roles in publishing. But if publishing is always very national, then often agents they aren't part of that infrastructure. So I think it's the case of as the economy of publishing in Nigeria, Ghana, the whole of the continent gets bigger and bigger, there's going to be more space for agents in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. People will be delighted. I know a number of authors who would be delighted to know about Accord, and I'm sure you have a website that has your submission guidelines and everything. So we'll be sure to point them in that direction.
Yeah, and I think what makes our work at Accord even more special is that we're not just a literary agency for adult fiction, which would be brilliant because that doesn't even exist, but we're a literary agency for books for young readers. You know, that specific focus in this niche of the industry that's often ignored is something that really excites me. If we look at so Sarah mentioned that because the industry isn't like super mature, still growing, there are lots of like gaps in places where opportunities could be created, like literary agents. Like, how are you an agent if you don't have enough people writing, if you don't have enough publishers who are willing to publish these books, right? But one of the ways our agency works is that we're looking at a market beyond the African market. Accord books will be published across the continent, but we are also ensuring that we're finding big markets across the world for these books. So, for me, I feel like our growth as an industry, like, from where we are now to where we can have one author have a whole bookshelf of books is going to look like lots of different steps. And those lots of different steps mean creating more commercial opportunity there are lots of people who are passionate about books who are not working in the industry because they cannot make a living in the industry because we aren't developed yet, right? And how many of us can sacrifice? It's a real privilege, actually. I find that most of the people who are making the sacrifice to pioneer the way in this space are privileged because they can make their living in other ways beyond this work. Because this work in the short term, doesn't pay what it should, right? And so I've been in this space for 12 years. I started the Golden Baobab Prize when I was still a college student with the idea that if we found enough writers, if we could build this prize that could bring people who cared about children's books together to evaluate which were the best stories, found writers, connected those writers to publishing opportunities, then we would have books, right? That was a very simplistic perspective. And 12 years later, I now know, because I thought that the problem was on the supply side, or not enough people are writing.
No, they are.
Yeah, and not enough people are being published. And then we run our literature prize, the Golden Baobab Prize, 4 authors and 4 illustrators all of these years, and we have so many authors submitting incredible stories, and we can't get them published. And why can't we get them published? Because those publishers aren't certain they can sell those books. So I got to a point where I realized it's not a supply problem, it's a demand problem. So like you said, getting parents to care, but are parents the only market for children's books? Who else can buy children's books so that this industry continues to thrive beyond parents in Nigeria? Okay, let's say Nigeria has, 100 million parents who would be prospective buyers of children's books, but only 10,000 of them are buying books. So then it's difficult to scale your work. Well, then maybe there's 10,000 in Nigeria, but 2,000 in Ghana and 1,000 in Togo. Like, once we really begin to look beyond the challenge, so it's not so much look internationally. The point is not international. The point is you need a bigger market so you can do a larger print run so your price comes down. So how do you look beyond the obstacles? Because in a nascent industry, the obstacles are more than the commercial opportunities. So it's those of us who are in here now who really have to begin to pave those ways and make things commercially viable, and then everybody else comes in, and then things begin to thrive. So that's why I'm really excited about our work at Accord, because it is beginning to move beyond a lot of what would have been traditional obstacles, which is like, there's no agency for adult fiction, so why is there an agency for children's books? Well, we are paving that way, right? International publishers are publishing adult African authors. We know a lot of adult African authors who've had best-selling books in the past 5-10 years. Where are those children's authors having the same kind of access, of same kinds of success and access? Accord wants to make that a possibility, and we hope that the success that we will have as a business and as a cause will open the space for more people to come in, so that in 3 years when we're having this conversation, there are 10 more literary agents doing incredible work, right? There are hundreds of authors whose names we now know because we have put in the work to grow the space. So when we really look at like the problem from like the macro and the micro, I feel like we move closer to solution. And that's something I've had to learn 12 years into the game, when before I was just like, let's find the books, let's do that. I realized it's like, our solution has to be sophisticated.
We have to build the environment, and we have to build it by encouraging authors, making sure that the stories are as strong as they can be, linking up with great bookshops like Victoria's Bookshop, thinking about book fairs, thinking about festivals. How many festivals on the continent do have a children's program? I think that because adults look after publishing, they tend to forget that children's publishing is such an important thing. Children's specialists, we're kind of niche, but we have to stick together. And we have to chat together, and we have to build together. And it will take the time it takes. But there's so much energy, and there's so much passion, and there's so much commitment. And it's an economic thing. We know, we can see all over the world that children's books are incredibly strong economically. They make money.
Yeah.
They have to be good quality, as Victoria was saying. They have to have great stories. They have to have authors who are prepared to work really hard to help sell those books. It's not only adult books that make money. Children's books make a lot of money for publishers, and we keep a business head on it as well. I think we're in a really strong position to build this.
Yeah,
great.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you brought this up. This is exactly why I started the Akada Children's Book Festival. Last year's edition was an absolute hit. It put pay to the notion that Nigerians don't like to read. I mean, I've always disagreed with that, and I was so glad to have a fora to prove that Nigerians love to read. Nigerian children love to read. They just need better access to good quality, age appropriate, culturally intelligent books. Like one child described it as book heaven. And so this year, despite the pandemic, the Akada Children's Book Festival is coming back, and of course we're doing it online.
Yay.
And I think it would be great for you to come and perhaps have a chat and just talk to people about what you do at Accord and how you can help them and vice versa. Yeah, but yes, so I fully agree with you. We do about publishers for some reason not seeing children, and I noticed the same with booksellers, with exception to Victoria, of course, but with a lot of bookstores that I went into when I first started writing, I would notice that either they didn't have a children's section, or their children's section was tucked around the back in some dark corner. The books were dusty, and I would come exactly. And I remember the first time I stepped into a bookstore that had the children's section up front and center, and they had a lovely reading area. I was so delighted. I did a post about it. It's like, oh, everybody come to this bookstore. These guys are awesome. And then after that, I discovered more, and then another one as well. So I guess people are finally getting the message that children's books should not be relegated to the back, to some dark, dank, dusty corner. But children's books are vital. They're essential. They're fun. They build, communication skills and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Readers. You won't have an adult reader if you don't have a child reader. People don't start reading when they're 24.
There you go. Thank you. Did you hear that? Sarah says you can't have an adult reader if you don't have a child reader. So if you want your child to read, let them, to love reading, let them start reading early. Okay. So yes, exactly. So before we run out of time, I just want to ask Deborah a quick question. What is it like being a publisher in West Africa? I was tempted to say, what's it like being a female publisher in West Africa? But I thought, let me just keep this on. I
feel like it's not complex enough for it to matter whether you're male or, well, it does matter a little bit actually, but I feel like it's still very much like, what is it like to be a publisher? Because the experience is very different from being a publisher of adult African books. The experience is also very different from being a publisher of general books, so textbooks, and the experience is also very different from being a publisher who's happy to do a mix, right? Like Victoria's bookshop is solely children's books. Our publishing house is solely African books by African authors and African illustrators. So there's a specificity to our work which makes it complex in execution, but it's the world that we want to see. So we stick to that. I think, we came into publishing after running the Golden Baobab Prize for a very long time, and our publishing effort was in response to the need to get a lot of the manuscripts that came to the Golden Baobab Prize published at a level that could stand with any of the best books in the world, as we've said. So we started publishing those books, and I think what I found is that there are complexities in the editorial process, in the publishing process, but those are fairly surmountable. Where the challenge comes is in the business of publishing in a market that is still that you still have to pioneer a lot of the way. So I have friends who have small independent children's publishing houses in different countries, and experiences are so different, right? They have support systems that are not available here. They have distributors that they're working with in different countries, etc. Within their own countries, there are systems that work for them that I don't have access to as a children's book publisher here. But then also that also means that those problems can possibly be opportunities, right? So where there aren't in Accra, where there aren't enough bookstores to be the major way that we find readers, how do we innovate to still find readers, right? So we've been really excited during this pandemic to partner with a really new exciting company called Booksy. So they're a subscription box company for African children's books, and Booksy has been organizing free online readings for parents. And the only thing is that you have to buy a book to join the reading, right? You should have the book so you can read, and we've sold a lot of books through that, and that's been really exciting, right? And it's a commercial partnership because Booksy, even though that reading is free, is building an audience for their subscription boxes, and they also make a profit off of all of the books that they sell. So those kinds of out of the box solutions have been what I've been excited about in the states where more traditional options for building the business are not as available yet.
Okay, good to know about Booksy. Yes, you're right. We do have to pioneer a lot of things and do a lot of things ourselves in comparison to I would say competitors in other countries who do have an infrastructure. But nevertheless, we shall persist. Nevertheless, we do persist. We press ahead. So, Deborah, just a quick follow-up question. Of which children's book prizes or awards should authors for this demographic be aware of? Which children's book prizes or awards should authors for this demographic be aware of?
Well, I'll list a number of them, but before that, I just really have to say that awards are, in my opinion, fantastic in a space where we're really looking to get energy. Because the thing with an award is that, there can be one winner or two or three winners, but they get you writing. Right. Mm-hmm. They give you a deadline, they give you a prize that you may win, they give you a publishing opportunity that gets you writing, so that even if you don't win the award, look, you have the book that you wrote, right? And you can still do something with that. So that's been really exciting for me to see. Throughout my work. Of course, we run the Golden Baobab Prize. It's currently on hold as we seek more sponsorship, but that's a prize that's been around for over 10 years. There's the BET Award. So the Golden Baobab Prize focuses more on picture books and early chapter books. So between it's like 11 and below, and the BET Award. The BET Award's design is really interesting. The Golden Baobab Prize is African-wide, but the BET Award is based in specific countries. I don't think there's a Nigerian BET Award, but there's a Ghanaian BET Award, there's a Kenyan BET Award, there's a Tanzanian BET Award, an Ethiopian BET Award, and it publishes young adult books. So, if writers in those countries can seek those out, those are the two main ones. I know there is, I think it's the NLNG Literature Prize, the Nigerian prize that every other 2 years there's one for children. It's not, the children's prize isn't consistent there, so people can look out for that. There are some South African literature prizes, most of them specific to publishing houses. So yeah, those are the main ones. I think from time to time, an association or an organization will organize a contest. But honestly, all of them matter. All of them matter because they get us moving, and win or not, you have your story, which is a win anyway. So yeah.
Thank you. Victoria, how can access to children's books be improved? In your opinion, how can access to children's books be improved across the continent?
Okay, so for children's books, I don't think there's such a problem in the urban areas because there are bookshops, there are quite a number of bookshops around. I think the real problem is in the rural areas, how to get books to the children in the rural areas where, I mean, the last thing on the parents' minds is, what is my child going to read? They're thinking more, what is my child going to eat, or what's
Gonna
he going to
eat, right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I just feel it's the most important thing is awareness, educating the parents, and then we need people who are willing to volunteer their time and their energy to go out into rural areas and do things like have book drives, book donations, and setting up library. That's very key. Even in my bookshop, for instance, I had so many experiences of children coming in. They want to read more and more, but the parents are probably not ready to spend the money or to. So what I did was I set up a section of the library of the bookshop. It's a library where children can just come in, borrow a book, read it, or take it home for a while and bring it back. I feel like if we have more policies, I mean, and the government has a big role to play in this, I think. We have more policies where libraries are set up in local areas, rural areas, where children can go in and borrow the books, and also in the government schools. If the government schools libraries can be stocked up, that will go a long way. And like I said before, book donations, book drive, because even my kids, my children, I look to the world. We have so many books that they've read and they're never going to read again. And I keep on thinking, how do I get these books to people that need them? But luckily, I mean, we have so many people doing volunteering and doing NGOs who come to the bookshop. They take books from kids that have read them, books that we've used, and they take it out to people who really need it. And
that's brilliant.
Yes, you need to see how excited these children are to receive this book that they never would have had access to otherwise. So I think it comes down to the communities, people ready to volunteer their time, their effort, their energy to go, because it's not economically beneficial to the people. You have to do exactly. So
Victoria, I'm actually curious, how do you justify that as a bookstore, giving space for people to come read for free and even borrow the books? That's amazing.
It was really important to me because I tell you that one of the things I like best when I set up the bookshop was the children coming in. First of all, the wonder in their eyes, seeing so many books, what to choose, what to read, and then sometimes it breaks my heart. I see some kids coming in. They don't have the mood to buy the books, and then they browse. They'll go around. I let them. They look around, and then they come.
She has a big heart. This is her CSR.
Look around, and I tell that they want some. So I just thought, this is a great idea. So what I did, I got some books. They were not all new. I got them from the UK, some pre-loved books, and I set up a section. So the hundreds and hundreds of books, for the children to read. And I think, for example, for middle grade books, you have books like in a series of about 10 or 12, and they want all, but they can't afford them all, but they have access to that. So I imagine that if you have things like in the local communities, the rural communities, it can be a place where the children can go to. We used to do that when we were kids. You can go to, they can exchange books, they can read, they can talk about the books. It can be something exciting for them to do, something. And I think really, really important. And like I said, if the government, they have a role to play in all that, if there can be new policies that make that paramount, make that important, make that necessary. So yes, I think that will go a long way to improving the level.
The important thing about libraries, particularly, I think, is they engender a love of reading and help support the culture of reading. And so when people make libraries available, even if it's not economically something that those individuals will make money from, ultimately the industry will flourish because of the people who've been through the library system and fallen in love with reading. I think there needs to be a lot of lobbying of governments and local government in order to fund libraries, as there is all over the world. And sadly, it's one of the things that's easiest not to spend money on, it seems. Other more flashy projects tend to get the financial support. But we can, as an industry, I think, and industry bodies within the industry, so organizations like the Publishers Association, can put pressure on governments to support the library system and to support local libraries as well as national libraries. I think it's a hugely important thing. And then I was thinking, Deborah, about Sylvia's project in Accra, the Library of Africa and the African Diaspora, which is a private lending library, and she charges people a relatively small amount of money as an annual fee to borrow any number of books that they want from the library. And she has a wonderful children's section within her collection of books, and she has thousands of books, and it's such a great idea. And that's very much driven by a private person, not by an institution, with her passion for reading and her passion for books.
Yes. So I'm glad we're talking about this, because libraries are near and dear to my heart. In Lagos, we have 12 public libraries, and I feel that we need so much more, so many. And I'm so glad to see some private organizations, individuals setting up libraries. The one closest to my house is run by a gentleman who left the building in his will, and they run the library really well, and they've been able to maintain it. And there are other organizations like P Foundation that goes around to low-income communities, mainly in Lagos, setting up libraries, and you wouldn't believe how precious these units are. Students who need to do homework, they don't have electricity in their home, so they come to the library because there's electricity in the library. They can get to do their homework. They can browse the internet. And so on and so forth. So some, the people I saw there, sometimes I say, "Oh, why are you here?" They come from morning to night. Oh, it's because there's an AC here, but it's a conducive environment for them to read and to learn. And book drives, those work very well as well. That's been one way of getting people to buy books, is that even though they may be reluctant to buy the books for themselves, or they've already bought one copy for their child, those with the heart and the passion for reading can be encouraged to buy more books to give out. And I find that happens a lot. In this program I have called Picture Book Storytime, a lot of the participants, the parents of the participants, tend to buy a lot of books and give out. And I find that, yes, if you identify those types of people that have a love of reading, a passion for reading, you can develop something that can help improve access to books for other people.
I really just want to piggyback on that to say that I think that's where the future is. The future is in people who care, finding what they can do in their little, in their own little corner. Because I think about, in Ghana, as we're publishing, about building a reading culture. And I'm like, the reading culture is built by people who love books, who share that joy with other people who love books. So we can call upon the government all we want, but I would love to see a grassroots movement of people who love books just in their own corner, gathering 100 children, 50 children, 20 children, and passing that joy on. That's, in my opinion, so much more doable than wanting the government to make a big move. And I feel like there's enough of us that makes a difference, and there's enough of us who would care about that, find joy and excitement in that. And so and if can we raise a next generation of readers? Yes, we can, if we do it that way. Because my son is 3 and loves books because I share that love with him. But if I had 20 more children that I had the capacity to do it, they would love books too. And if we all did it, it blows my mind. And so again, for me, it comes back to the point of, there are some things in this vision that we want to see of an Africa with books that children can see themselves in. I love how you call them culturally intelligent books. So that vision might or might not be achieved in our lifetime. If we're waiting on government, it's not going to be achieved. If we are calling upon ourselves and really and really championing some kind of citizen-led movement, I think we have so much more capacity to really see that happen. And what would that mean for political development? What would that mean for economic development? What would that mean for getting the continent out of poverty? I feel like that's doable.
It is. And there's so many reading clubs. And I want to use this opportunity. I thank you so much, Deborah, for bringing this up. I want to use this opportunity to give a shout out to Page Flippers Club in Kaduna, to Tabitha's Kids in Abuja, to INT Corner in Port Harcourt, to Kids Literacy Circle, Dishal Ali, you're doing a great job. Farida at Bookworm Cafe, you're doing a great job. These ladies all run reading clubs. Readland, you're doing a great job. They do exactly what you're talking about. Young Readers Library as well. You are all doing a great job. They gather kids together, usually at the weekend online. It started online for obvious reasons because of the pandemic, and it's just continuing. And because it's online, they actually have a chance to expand the readership. Book Hangout, Kemi, you're doing a great job. Also, a big shout out to all these various individuals who are calling kids together, calling young adults together to read and to discuss books, because you're right, you know, if we at least do what we can in our power, we may make a difference.
It has such impact. It has such impact to do things from grassroots. I mean, it's the love of community and the support within communities that ultimately makes the biggest difference to our societies, I think. So it's absolutely fantastic to see what's happening.
Yes, people do care, and they're doing what they can. Sarah, question for you. What are the trends you see evolving in the West African children's literary scene over the next 10 years? What trends do you see evolving?
I think one of the things that I'm beginning to see coming through quite a bit is that wonderful speculative fiction. So fantasy, science fiction, completely other world building fiction. And that's very exciting to see. I think we'll see more and more of that coming through, where people allow their imagination to go to entirely self-created universes with wonderful narrative within that. But also those stories drawing on an African tradition of storytelling. So drawing on ideas of myths, legends, local religious practices, build this fantasy world. I think that might be the biggest thing I'm feeling at the moment coming through.
There's a lady that does that in children's books. Her pen name is Simisayo Brownstone, and her series is called Fei Fei. I think she's got 2 books out on that. She's going to be at the Akara Children's Book Festival, which is happening next week. She's, I think it's Fei Fei and Captain Nosa is my favorite out of the 2. She has one called Fei Fei and Madame Koi Koi or something like that. But it's based on exactly what you've just described, speculative fiction, but fun and done for, I would say, ages between 5 and 10. You know, my daughter's 6 and she loves it. So yes, that's good to know. So that is what you see evolving over the next 10 or so years. I think
so. Possibly sooner than that. I think it seems to be bubbling up so strongly at the moment. I think that those are the books that we're going to see coming through quite strongly fairly soon.
Yes. And I would also say, Sarah, you know, Francophone Africa, I think sometimes we don't include them in the conversation, but there's always, like, you know, exciting things, like really beautiful illustration in their books. So I'm also really keen to see, you know, how that plays out and how Anglophone and Francophone countries can begin to market to each other.
Yes. Funny you should mention that, because with my book, Why Do You Wash Your Hands, I translated it into indigenous languages, Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa. And somebody told me, oh, you need to do it in French because there's a huge Hausa French. Okay, so they come in English Hausa, English Yoruba, English Igbo. And they're like, you have to do a Hausa French one. I'm like, Hausa French? They said, that along the border, you know, in Mali, I think they said, or somewhere like that they speak French and they also speak Hausa. So I'm like, okay, so it's, yes, so you're right. So we need to think about the Francophone countries as well. Deborah, is the rising trend of self-publishing a bane or a boon to traditional publishers?
It's one of the best things to happen, in my opinion. Again, there's more happening, there's more momentum out of, you know, like we've just said, self-published books will create readers, and those readers will read traditionally published books. I think it's one of the best things that's happened to the industry, and I'd love to see more of that happen in the children's book space.
Okay, great. Then Victoria, in what ways have ebooks affected the children's book trade in West Africa?
I wouldn't say very much.
A little bit about ebooks?
Yes, I wouldn't say it affected it very much because...
Not very much?
No, I mean, okay, well, you mean book trade in general? my experience is that for children, they will read whatever is put in. They will read what they're given. If they're given a physical book, they'll read it. If they're given an ebook, they'll read it. And find that most days these children, they're on their devices. And I feel, when I say not very much, it has, but I just feel like there's so much more that can happen. I feel like there's so much more that can be done, that if we give them greater access to a lot of these devices and we get greater chances. I think my issue right now is that for so many children in Nigeria, they don't even have access to physical books. Yeah. So we'll not talk of ebooks. I feel like, so where are we going to start from? I just feel like there's such a wide gap in the market for that. So I just feel like there's so much more that can be done in that area.
Okay.
Do you think there's more happening at the older end of the market for teen and YA, young adults?
Okay, for young adults, yes. Yes, you're very correct. So for the young adult, for the older kids, my daughter is 13. She reads about maybe 2 books a week and never a physical book.
Yeah.
It's always on her device. She reads countless stories, always on her device. So for the older children, for the young adults, for the teens, there's so many books written, so many, they read multiple stories because they're always on their phones. So to that extent, yes. But I think it's less so for the younger children.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the younger children, not much, because they don't really have, a lot of Nigerian parents, I think, are still a little bit hesitant about leaving their children with devices for long periods. And I think in the rural areas, they barely even get the certificate with any kind of electronic material. So for the younger, I feel like there's still a lot more that can be done in that area.
Okay.
It's an exciting opportunity.
Yes. From my perspective as a bookseller, actually, the ebooks helped to keep my business going throughout the pandemic, through the slowdown, through the lockdown and everything. And good thing that we had already started working on our e-commerce platforms, and then suddenly COVID and stay at home made it completely essential, because our physical sales dwindled down to 0. And if not for the ebooks, we wouldn't have had any income coming in during that season. It would have been a real struggle to pay salaries, etc. Yeah. So in that aspect, from my perspective, ebooks has actually helped to open up a completely new market, and a totally bigger market, because it's easier to sell to people who are not physically located in Lagos. Because there was one time when interstate travel was not allowed. By having ebooks, you could transcend that barrier.
And what age range were these books for?
My books are for children under the age of 10. Mainly, I write for age 2 to 6. Yeah. And
ebooks were selling for that age range.
Oh yes. But I had to knock down the price, though. I brought the price down. I did like a COVID special, knocked it down by 50%. And I think this is the price that the market wants. So I've actually stayed at that, 50% off range till now. I haven't taken the prices back to pre-COVID times. Yeah.
So, sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, that was great, and I see what you're saying. I can imagine that for you, for you selling your books, it must have really helped. But I also feel like, even during this COVID period, a lot of children were totally shut out, even for their education, and they were totally shut up. In Nigeria, for instance, I cringe to think of just how many children don't even get to see a screen, don't even get to see a device. Even sometimes the books they're reading are old torn books that have been handed down from like 3 or 4 readers down the line. So I just worry, what happens to them? What if, for instance, we already said, let's go electronic, let's sell more ebook, which is a fantastic thing. Are these children going to be left out? Are they going to be left in the cold? So I think that's where my concern is. I think that's where my concern is, basically.
So this is really good. Apparently, we've actually run out of time. There's so much more that we could say on this topic, but I don't think we're going to go. I certainly am not going to go exclusively ebook. I personally prefer the printed matter. I love it. I come from a background of newspaper publishing, and I still prefer the physical paper rather than the e-paper. So definitely, I'm not cutting out printed copy. We're going to be doing both. So ladies, thank you ever so much for this very, very engaging, very enlightening session on Tales sans Moonlight, right? Writing for today's African children. Once again, thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Victoria. And any last words before we sign off? Victoria, just a 30-second wrap up. Any last words?
Yes, just that I just hope writers want to do more. They up their game, so to speak, write better stories, make better books, and encourage children to get their hands on those books and read them and love them more.
Excellent. Thank you. Sarah?
I think we're seeing a renaissance of really wonderful storytelling coming out of the African continent for young readers. And it's just so exciting. It's a really exciting time. I'm looking forward to reading some fabulous stories.
Excellent. Thank you. And Deborah.
Yeah, I think there's power in each book lover finding what they can do to help to advance the cause of African children's books. So more of us should, get into that.
Okay. Well, ladies, thank you ever so much. It's been a fun hour and a half or so, hanging out with you, having this lovely conversation. Thank you to all of the team at the Ake Arts and Book Festival 2020. May this be your biggest and best year yet, despite the fact that it's all online. And that's it. We hope to see you again next year. And do please enjoy the rest of the sessions. Check out the akefestival.org website for lots more information. Thank you. And very well done, Lola, for putting this together.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
If you ever need a new place to go, you can join me in a world of words. When it seems like I'm nowhere to be found, if you look, you'll find me in a book. Let's take a ride to the past in the back of a phoenix. Let's float around the moon. You'll never be alone, now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the word in a book. You'll never be alone, now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the word in a book.